The day my own father pointed his finger at me in a courtroom and called me a liar was the day I finally understood what true betrayal feels like. I used to think that the safest place in the world was home, that no matter what life threw at me, my family would always be my shelter. I grew up believing that a father's love was unconditional, that it couldn't be bought, sold, or poisoned by anything. I was wrong. My name is Sarah. I'm 29 years old. And for most of my life, I was the girl who did everything right. I studied hard, worked 2 jobs while finishing my degree, never asked for too much, and always put my family first. I was the one who called every Sunday, the one who skipped vacations to help pay for my younger brother's school fees, the one who smiled through pain because I believed that family was worth every sacrifice. But none of that mattered the day my father looked me in the eyes and chose money over me. It started 3 years ago when my grandfather passed away. He was a quiet, gentle man, a retired civil servant who had spent 60 years saving every penny he ever earned. He never talked much about money. But when he died, everything changed. Because he left behind a property, a small house on the edge of the city, and a handwritten will that said it belonged to me. My grandfather had always had a soft spot for me. I was the one who sat with him during his last months, who read to him, who held his hand when the nights got long. He told me once, in that tired, paper-thin voice of his, "Sarah, you are the one who stayed, and staying has to mean something." I didn't know what he meant then, but I understood the moment the will was read. He left me the house. Just me. Not my father, not my uncles. Me. The months that followed were the darkest of my life. I had no money for a lawyer. I was working a receptionist job that barely covered my rent, and now I was facing a legal battle that could strip me of the only gift my grandfather had ever given me. Worse, the case had spread through the family like fire. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone had an opinion. Everyone had chosen a side, and almost none of them had chosen mine. I remember calling my mother one night, desperate and exhausted. She listened quietly for a long time. Then she said something I will never forget. "Sarah, your father is doing what he thinks is right for the family. Maybe you should just let it go. The house isn't worth all this pain." I put the phone down gently. I didn't slam it. I didn't scream. I just set it on the table and sat there in the silence. And I thought, is this what I am worth to them? Is this what all those years of loving them cost me? That's when I realized that letting go wasn't an option. Not because of the house, not because of the money, but because if I walked away, I would be confirming the lie. I would be agreeing that I had done something wrong. And I refused, with everything left inside me, to do that. I started fighting back. I couldn't afford a lawyer, so I taught myself. I spent every free hour in the public library, reading about property law, civil proceedings, evidence requirements. I made notes in the margins of photocopied pages. I organized every document I had. My grandfather's medical records, letters he had written to me, photographs of us together, receipts from my visits. Every single time I had been there to care for him, I had a trail. I also reached out to the hospital where my grandfather had spent his last months. I requested his psychological assessment records, documents that could show whether or not he had been mentally competent when he signed the will. And then I found something that changed everything. Buried in a stack of documents that my father's lawyer had submitted to the court, documents I had the legal right to access, was a letter. A letter my grandfather had written 2 years before he died. In it, he had described clearly and in his own words his intentions for the property. He said he...
The day of the final hearing, I wore my grandfather's old watch on my wrist. It was the only thing of his I had been given before all of this started. I held it like a promise. The courtroom was small and smelled like old paper. My father sat at the opposite table, flanked by 2 lawyers. He didn't look at me when I walked in. I noticed that. The man who had raised me, who had taught me to ride a bicycle, who had sat beside me when I had nightmares as a child, couldn't bring himself to look at his own daughter. I looked at him the entire time. Nadia presented the hidden letter first. The judge, a composed woman with silver-streaked hair, put on her glasses and read it slowly. The courtroom went very quiet. Then Nadia called the witness, my father's own uncle, the man who had been present when my grandfather signed that letter, took the stand. He was 81 years old, and he walked slowly. But his voice was steady. He confirmed everything. He said my grandfather had been of sound mind. He said the letter was genuine. And then, in a moment I will carry with me for the rest of my life, he looked directly at my father and said, my granduncle, on the witness stand, your father would be ashamed of you today. That girl sat with him every week. You didn't visit him once in his last year. The silence that followed was absolute. My father's lawyers tried to recover. They questioned the letter's authenticity. They argued about dates. But the judge had seen enough. She asked my father directly whether he had known about the letter prior to filing his case. He hesitated for just a moment too long. And in that hesitation, the truth filled the room. The judge ruled in my favor. The property was confirmed as mine. My grandfather's will was upheld. And my father, for withholding evidence and filing a fraudulent claim, was ordered to pay all legal costs and faced a formal finding of misconduct that would follow his name in any future legal proceedings. It wasn't jail. It wasn't dramatic enough for movies. But in that world, in the world of a man who valued reputation above everything else, it was devastating.